Okay, this question says due to lanthanide contraction, we have to see out of the given options what is happening because of specifically lanthanide contraction. FeCO and Ni have equal size. Iron, cobalt and nickel is what is meant here. Iron, cobalt and nickel, they have similar size. So this could be a nice trap that is said. But is this because of lanthanide contraction? No, right? So in fact, iron, cobalt, nickel are in your 3D series. By then lanthanides are not even there, right? So obviously lanthanide contraction is not something that is affecting this. What is happening across your, in fact, I mean, when we go beyond manganese, right? So manganese, iron, cobalt, nickel, right? Till here, what we see is that these have almost the same size. I mean, from manganese to iron also, there is a slight reduction. On going from left to right, ideally size is supposed to decrease. But what happens is that beyond manganese, we know manganese has a outermost, I mean, let's say 3D configuration of 3D5. Iron, you see 3D6. Cobalt, you see 3D7. Nickel, you see 3D8. Which means that one by one, the orbitals are getting paired, right? So d orbitals do have poor shielding, but still understand that this is like an inner shell that we are talking about. The outermost shell is still your fourth shell. So as your 3D orbitals get more and more paired, you will see that there is better shielding of nucleus that is happening. So the expected decrement in size that is there because of the increase in Z effective, that is kind of balanced out by this increased shielding that is there because of paired d orbitals. So what we see is that all of these, I mean iron, cobalt and nickel, they have approximately the same size, but the reason is not because of lanthanide contraction, it is because of pairing of d orbitals, right? Yeah, so then after that we have zirconium and hafnium have equal size. Yes, this is specifically because of lanthanide contraction, right? So what do we have? D block, you have scandium, titanium, yttrium, lanthanum. Below titanium you have zirconium, below that you have hafnium, vanadium, niobium, tantalum. So when you are looking at these, right, so I don't need more elements beyond this to make my point. The point is that when I'm looking at your 4D series, right, and 5D series, right, what is seen other than yttrium and lanthanum, what we see is that all of these corresponding elements have the same size, and iambium, tantalum, as we go forward all the way till the end, right? So you have your palladium, platinum, gold, silver, and even your cadmium and mercury, they have approximately the same size. I mean corresponding elements, I'm not saying all of these elements have the same size. From left to right there is an expected decrement in size that is there. On top of that, what we see is that the corresponding elements from top from 4D and 5D, they end up having approximately the same size. This is because of lanthanide contraction. So what happens is that when you're looking at lanthanum has an electronic configuration of 5D1, right? So before this you had your cesium and barium, right? So 6s1, 6s2 happened here. After that you are supposed to fill 4f, but yeah, there is an exception in lanthanum that okay, 4f is a highly distorted high energy inner orbital. Instead of that we see that 5d1 is what is seen in lanthanum. That is partially why we place it on your d block only, right? Beyond that we know there is this transition, these F block elements, right? So cerium onwards we see all the way till lutetium, whatever you want to call it. So what is seen is that across these elements, which are what we call as our 4f series elements, the electrons are going into very poor shielding 4f orbitals, because of which there is a high increase in Z effective as we go across your 4f series. So there is a lot of increment in nuclear attraction, which means size decreases across your 4f series elements, and this particular decrease is what we call as lanthanide contraction. What that does is, by the time I come back and I start with hafnium 72 atomic number, right? So what we see here is that zirconium and hafnium, when I'm looking at these two elements, they end up having almost the same size. Similarly, niobium, tantalum also, they end up having almost the same size. The reason is because of the contraction in size that happened across your 4f series. Do you see why lanthanum and yttrium doesn't follow this? This is also important to know, because in lanthanum there is no 4f electrons, it's only 5d1, and that particular thing that across 4f a lot of size decrement has happened is not valid here. So from yttrium to lanthanum you see an increment in size as expected because a new shell is added, but zirconium, hafnium, niobium, tantalum and all the way till the end you see that corresponding elements of 4d and 5d series have same size because of lanthanide contraction. So yeah, this is of course our answer, right? All f block ions have equal size. This is not even given right, so there is no reason why this should be right. Obviously, all the ions, why would they all have the same size? There is no logic behind this. It's a random statement. All isoelectronic ions have equal size. Again, same story. It doesn't make any sense, right? So obviously your Cl minus, S2 minus, K plus, all of these are isoelectronic. Obviously they don't have the same size. Size depends upon Z. Higher the value of Z, higher will be Z effective and lower will be the size, right? So this is also a wrong statement. This is also a wrong statement. This is a right statement, but not because of lanthanide contraction. So our final answer is B option. Okay, this question says 1 mole of an ideal gas for which Cv is equal to 3 by 2R. What does this tell you? Monoatomic gas, 3 degrees of freedom, right? 3 by 2R is heated reversibly at a constant pressure of 1 atmosphere from 25 degrees C to 100 degrees C, the value of delta H. This is very easy, right? So obviously, what do we have here? Constant pressure. What does that tell you? You can use delta H is equal to QP is equal to NCP delta T, or in fact NCP delta T is something that you can use always, right? So delta H is always equal to NCP delta T. So what do we have here? Cv is known to us. Cv, rather this is Cv molar, but yeah, whatever. So Cv is known, so Cp molar can be said to be equal to Cv molar plus R, which is going to be equal to 3 by 2R plus R, which is equal to 5 by 2R, right? Now, do we know delta T? Yes, we know it is going from 25 to 100 degrees C. So we know delta T to be 75 Kelvin. 75 degrees is same difference, right? I mean, difference is what we are talking about. 1 mole is also known to us, so easy, right? The only thing is that when I'm looking at the values, I can see all of the values are in calories. So I'm going to take R in 1.987, approximately let's take it as 2, right? So R, I'm going to take it approximately as 2 for the sake of ease of calculation. So what do we get? Delta H will be equal to 1 into 5 by 2 into 2, R I'm taking as 2 into 75, right? So what will this be? I mean, instead of 2, it should have been 1.987. So the answer that I'm getting will be slightly larger. Something slightly smaller than this is what I am searching for. How much smaller? 0.01 into 75, right? So around what? Let's see, whatever, right? So into 5 into 75. 5 into 75 is how much? 350 plus 25, 375 calorie. This is what I'm getting. Obviously, the correct answer has to be slightly less than this. So I'm seeing a 372.56 calorie here. You can see that the recurrent theme is that 1 decimal is getting shifted in B, C and D, right? So yeah, of course, I'm getting 375. This is the closest to it. So our final answer is C option. Okay, this question says, calculate the lattice formation enthalpy in kilojoules per mole of LiF, right? Given, sublimation of Li is given, dissociation of half mole of F2 is given, wow. Ionization enthalpy of Li is given, and electron gain enthalpy of 1 mole of fluorine atoms in gas phase is given to us. Enthalpy of formation overall of LiF is also given to us. Right. So what is this? This is a direct application of what we call as our Born-Haber cycle. Pretty straightforward, right? So what are we making? Enthalpy of formation is defined as the enthalpy change when 1 mole of a substance in its standard state is obtained from required amount of the constituent elements all in their standard states, right? So lithium is in solid phase, fluorine is in gas phase. I'm taking half mole and I'm producing 1 mole of LiF in solid phase. This is what is going to be called as enthalpy of formation, right? And Born-Haber cycle tells us that, okay, instead of this single step enthalpy, I can also divide it into multiple intermediate steps that are actually taking place, and then I can think of sum of all of these enthalpies to be equal to enthalpy of formation, right? So first of all, let me convert this into Li gas, then I will convert this into Li plus gas, and then I will convert this first into, by dissociation, I will convert it into F gas, and then I will convert this into F minus gas by adding an electron, and then these two will combine and give us LiF, and in this process the enthalpy change, that is what we are calling as the lattice formation enthalpy, right? So we will see sum of all of these should be equal to the enthalpy, net enthalpy of formation that is given. That is our aim, right? That is our idea basically. So let's see what are the values given. So direct step enthalpy of formation is minus 594. So minus 594 kilojoule per mole. I'm going to take everything in kilojoule per mole, right? So minus 594 is equal to what was it? First I have to do sublimation of Li, so 155.3 kilojoule. Then I have to dissociate half mole of F2, which is exactly what is given here directly, so 75.3. Then I have to ionize lithium, so I need 520 kilojoule, and electron gain enthalpy of 1 mole of fluorine gas is minus 333, which means energy is released, minus 333 kilojoule. And then what else is there? Our lattice enthalpy is also there, which is the last step, right? Lattice formation enthalpy, and this whole thing should be equal to your net enthalpy of formation. Let's rejuggle this. What do I get? Lattice energy will be equal to, when I take these on the other side, this will become positive, all other things are going to be negative, right? So what do I get? I'm going to get 333 minus 594 minus 155.3 minus 75.3 minus 520. Wow, right? Not a very good calculation, but yeah, who cares, right? So I have, how do I simplify this? Do I see something that I can do to simplify this? 55 plus 75 is how much? 55 plus 75 is 60 plus 71, 30, right? So 230.6, 230 plus 520 is how much? 250, 750, right? So 750.6 is what is there out here. Then a minus 594 is also there, and then 333 was already there, right? So let's see, 594 plus 750, right? So 600 plus 750 would have been 1356 short of that, so 1344, right? So 1344.6, 333 minus this, right? So 1344.6 minus 333, if I do, what will I get? 1011.6, right? So minus 1011.6, something like this is what I'm getting as a value. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm seeing a 1011.6 as the first option itself. So yeah, this is our lattice formation enthalpy for LIF, which is obviously option A. Okay, this question says the given reaction is 2x plus y, all of these are in gas phase, even products are in gas phase, giving us 2z plus 80 kilocalorie, right? So this plus 80 kilocalorie tells me that this is like counted as if it is a product, which means that this is an exothermic reaction, or you can say that enthalpy change is negative, right? Yeah, so which combination of pressure and temperature gives the highest yield of Z, right? So we need more and more Z. This is the idea. So the application is obviously, this question is obviously based on application of Le-Chatelier's principle. What are we seeing here? Impact of pressure and temperature on such an equilibrium, right? So here, this is something that is evolving heat, right? So how can I promote this reaction? By some way or the other, like providing conditions that absorbs heat, right? So reduce temperature. So if you reduce temperature, you can see that an exothermic reaction will be going in the forward direction, right? So you reduce the temperature, more and more system will try to throw heat away into the surroundings to increase the temperature of surroundings, and you can think of it in that way, that Z can be produce more and more, right? So exothermic reaction, reduce the temperature, and what else is there? You see there are 3 moles of gaseous reactants and 2 moles of gaseous products, right? So when I am increasing pressure, I know that the system goes in the direction where it can reduce pressure, which is in the direction where there is less number of moles, right? So the forward direction you can see is where there is less number of moles, or you can say delta Ng here is negative, right? So for some reaction where delta Ng is negative, how do I promote that forward direction? By increasing the pressure or by reducing the volume, right? So what do I need? I need high pressure and I need low temperature, right? So what do I see here? Okay, out of all the, there is definitely not a particular answer that I can tell you about, obviously. What I am looking for out here is the highest value of pressure and the lowest value of temperature, combination such that this is working place, right? So there are only 2 pressures that I can see, 1000 and 500. So obviously 1000 is what I would prefer, right? And as far as temperatures are concerned, again, I'm only seeing 2 temperatures, 500 and 100, right? So I can say that, yeah, out of these, the lower temperature would be what is preferable to me, which means that this is what is preferable to me. So I have 1000 atmosphere and 100 degrees C as the option C, where there is high pressure and low temperature, which will help a reaction where number of moles is decreasing and heat is being evolved. So our correct answer is C option. Okay, this question says when 73 grams of HCl is added to a 1 liter of an acidic buffer solution, its pH changes from 3.4 to 2.9. The buffer capacity of this buffer is, right? So what is buffer capacity? Buffer capacity is defined as the number of moles of acid or base that should be added, H plus or OH minus, that should be added so that pH changes by unity, right? Or you can also say that buffer capacity, you can write buffer capacity to be equal to number of moles divided by change in pH, right? So what will we get? We can say what is added here? 73 grams of HCl, right? So number of moles is given by weight divided by molar mass. So this is 73 divided by 36.5, which is obviously 2, right? 36.5 into 2 is 73. So when I added 2 moles, pH reduced by 0.5, right? So change in pH, modulus of change in pH is what is primarily what we are looking at. So yeah, 2 moles were added and pH changed by 0.5, reduced by 0.5. So you can say that 4 moles should be added to change the pH by 1. Though this is not exactly true, but yeah, you can see that N by del pH is giving me the value of 4, right? So if 2 moles change the pH by 0.5, then we are saying that 4 moles would have changed the pH by 1. This is what is being said here. Buffer capacity is N by del pH or dN by dpH. You can say like that also. And the value is turning out to be 4, which is obviously option C.